Iowa State climatologist Elwynn Taylor says there's a good chance this year's corn yields will be below normal, but he also believes precipitation will be better than last year. You'll hear in our interview his thoughts on precipitation and temperature for Nebraska over the next few months, and his analysis of why farmers here can look to Arkansas for their planting forecasts. First, though, we start off with the good news about winter in the state.
Well, it hasn't been near as miserable as we thought. It's been normal precipitation since the 1st of October. October 1st is New Year's Day for the hydrologist, for the climate year, for the water year. Any moisture that falls after the 1st of October, we count toward next year's water. And since the 1st of October, at least the eastern 1/9 of the state of Nebraska has been normal.
So one of the big reasons, right, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the big reasons for last year's volatility was the La Nina, yes? Is that correct?
That is it.
Okay, so now where does the La Nina stand and where could it go once we get into planting season and into summer?
Well, this La Nina kind of fooled some people that hadn't studied these things over the years, because this was the second strongest La Nina in history. The strongest was back in the mid-50s. Well, that La Nina, though, if you looked at it on paper, appeared to the La Nina itself to last about a year and a half to 2 years. The effects went on for 4 years, and we knew it'd do it again, and we're through year 3 now. We expect some effects to still be here.
But not as severe?
But not as severe.
Okay.
It takes that 4th year to get out of the condition that was worst in the 3rd year, 2012, except for Texas and Oklahoma. They had their worst year in 2011. Well, the same thing happened back in the 50s. They had their worst year in 55. We had our worst year up here in 56.
The way the precipitation, you showed a graph today that showed the drops in precipitation and the year before and the year after. And based off of that, you think that this year isn't going to be as bad, but it's not going to reach the trend line. Is that accurate?
Well, I only think that because we've only had a year this dry 5 times before since we've been keeping records in the Midwest. And all 5 times, it took more than 1 year to get out of it. And so we assume that this, the 6th time, it will take more than 1 year to get out of it as well. It might be faulty logic because 5 isn't much of a number to judge on, but at least it's 100%.
Yeah. What about temperature? We didn't spend time talking about that today, but what about temperature?
The temperature in the summer is what really counts on this, and what we call the stressful temperature. Whenever the temperature is over 86, we start to call that it might be stressful for crops. Because if the crop's a little short of water or has any other things that make it less than perfect, then as temperatures go above 86, it starts hurting the crop. But if everything's perfect, it's when the temperature goes above 93 that it always hurts the crop. So we count the temperature, the number of hours or days that the temperature was over 93 degrees, we know that's hurting the crops. Over 86, it might be hurting the crops. So we call those the stress days. Well, we had more stress units here in eastern Nebraska this past year than we did in 1988, which was a widespread drought here. And so as we pay attention, we can look back and see what years were close to this one in precipitation, in heat stress, growing degree days, if we want to look at that, because they're important as we go into the summer. If we get extra growing degree days after the corn silks, our yield just takes a nosedive because it matures so fast, it doesn't have time to put on weight.
So do you think it's going to hit those stages this summer?
I'll be watching as the week by week goes by.
Okay.
But we do expect that the precipitation will be shy. We expect that the heat will still be a little above normal, and those will be the main stresses. We can't tell the growing degree days yet.
What do you think, why is Arkansas important for this area?
Well, it isn't really important, but it gives us a clue.
Right, why is it a key?
What happens in the winter is what we call the Arctic front, the extreme south limit at the present time of the air flowing down off the high Arctic. It has a limit. It's somewhere up in northern Canada during the summer and somewhere near Nebraska border with South Dakota in the winter. Well, as that Arctic front retreats as the days get longer, we see the movement of all the weather patterns go further north. So we're interested in what's going on south of us that will be moving north to us. So if Arkansas, in the month before we plant the crop, is bone dry, we'll probably have a bone dry planting season. they're sopping wet, we'll have a sopping wet planting season.
I'll ask you this to close out. Where in Iowa is the break line between where it's really dry and where they're pretty darn lucky?
Well, if you have to just put one line for it, you'll call it Interstate 35. And that is the break across Minnesota, Iowa, and between Kansas and Missouri, and across Oklahoma, and the break in Texas. Dallas is in a different world than Fort Worth if you're coming in from the east and going west.
How much is that difference? When you get up to that east side of it, how good is it?
Well, it's almost as good as normal now.
And on the other side?
It is about 3 chances out of 20 of being better than average.
One final note from our discussion. If you think 2012 was dry, 2025 could take the cake. Elwynn says the combination of tree ring records over 800 years and the relation of sunspots shows the worst weather years happen every 89 years. 1847, 1936, and if the pattern stays on schedule, 2025 could set up to be severely dry.